Like, dude, you guys sometimes need to. This is how you do it. It's like.
As of guitars, what you need is 6 strings and an asshole, right?
There's something I missed in the world. Haven't you heard?
I don't think we're carrying a torch and
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want so real. You're growing fat in your fear. You and your talking your
one thing though that's different between now and back then, I think, when I say back then, that's in the 90s. That was like when we were at that boiling point. It was we got lucky that we all were part of this wave that was, and we were there. We managed to make it up to the top of that crest, and you know, Sony was at its height. Sony Music, all these record labels were signing bands. It was a very exciting time, you know, and a lot of things were happening, and money was being spent into recordings and putting up gigs. I think that added a lot to the excitement. But nowadays, there's not so much of that support from record labels who are struggling to get by now.
Speaking of excitement, when Sony was out there, they were the ones who got me in Sony, Tirso and Manuel.
Right. Yeah.
They had their independent company there. And
Blue Jean Junkie's first
Jean
record,
Junkies,
man. That was good.
yeah, it was with Sony distributed that.
Yeah. That was
With their indie label.
That was a great record.
You were the first indie label of Sony, right?
Sort of.
Sort of, no?
Yeah. We had like some sort of unofficial distribution agreement.
Yeah, you had an entire team back then.
I didn't know shit, man. I was just trying to figure it out. I thought I knew what I was doing, but then
Yeah,
of course
yes, you
learn.
did, Tirso.
All I know is this. I go, look, I know I could talk to these guys, and they could, if you gave them a good enough product, they could put it out. And I knew that. I didn't know all the nuances of the business. Maybe if I did, it would have made more money, but I didn't.
Well, at least it did make money.
It did. It was good, and Sony treated us very, very, very well. They were a great company. You know, all the bands, and you read about these guys. Everyone's pissed off because you know we're not making any money anymore. You know, because the royalty checks are so small. Because they're all getting paid from streaming, and that's been the Philippine model ever since. You get a pittance. You've always just gotten a pittance from royalties and whatnot. You've got money playing gigs. That's why we always gig all the time, mercilessly. So now all these guys have to do it. Why do you think Guns N' Roses is back? They hate each other, man, but they're back because the tours are big, you know. So a lot of these guys do that. They hate each other, or they'll set aside their differences, or because they can come out and tour, and everyone's doing it again. But that's been our existence since we started.
That's where the money is. The gigging, the playing live.
So on the one hand, the streaming thing is like, okay, yes, they're not getting paid as much in royalties and whatnot, but it forces people to come out and play, which I think is a great thing. And then there was something though. Part of the article said songs with long intros and stuff. There's no more of that. Nobody's doing that anymore because
See, that's my whole thing against the whole streaming thing.
yeah, it counts as a stream if it goes 30 seconds. And
Right,
so
right, yeah.
if you look, and in the article they pointed out, I think it was where the streets have no name, where it's a full minute of just ambient noise. But you know, it works. But that's like almost every Pink Floyd, practically every Floyd song has that. So they're saying it's gonna kill. It's like don't bore us, get to the chorus, but like times 10 on steroids. You know? Like, it's more urgent now.
Yeah.
But apparently you're dealing with algorithms and shit that look for that. But I don't know, you know. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think Pink Floyd is suffering.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
a good song is a good song, and if it
Yeah, but here's my thing. You're not gonna get another band like Pink Floyd.
maybe because
of
they
this,
won't.
This
Yeah.
mentality where you gotta get to the
Exactly.
point.
Well, you have to remember, it started with the singles, right? 45,
Mhm.
everything quick, snappy. So this don't bore us, get to the chorus. That's a very old.
Yeah.
That was from the 50s,
The
man.
mentality.
The early Beatles, quick, snappy, gotta be quick.
Yeah, the hook.
And it was as a reaction to that disposable one single is when the LP came out, and then people wanted more. They wanted like a longer story, the concepts, and this is
Yeah.
where bands like Floyd evolved. And
Floyd.
so now we're back in the whole single thing, where very short attention span. It's like we're back in the early 60s. man.
So-called radio friendly.
Yeah,
But going back to the streaming, I think there's gonna be a point where they're gonna have to readjust what they're paying out to the artists.
They should, man.
Yeah, the
Fucking record companies.
Whoever the
Step
fuck
forward.
owns Spotify is a multi-billionaire,
Yeah.
Right.
while somebody who like streams 1 million, you know,
Makes nothing.
gets like 0.008 cents
Yeah.
per stream.
But you know,
That's
but you
what,
know,
30
there's something
seconds,
wrong,
60
you know,
seconds.
but you know,
where it counts.
yeah, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
But you know who fucked that up were the fucking record companies. The rights holders, who are basically all the record companies.
Well,
So,
I think that was an
yeah.
answer to Napster also, because Napster was free.
Right.
Now that you get the people to say, okay, you have to pay for music, you
Yeah.
start them off there. But I think now is the time when
Dude.
people have to realize, okay, there's something very, very wrong
Very.
with this. Now let's revisit
For the, especially
the
You know what I'm
the
paying?
sharing of that.
I'm paying, what am I paying? I got a family premium account.
Oh,
It's like 129 pesos.
right. A month.
129 pesos.
A month.
You know, streaming probably has life. I like it, I enjoy it, but I agree that it's too cheap and you're charging people too little. You need to charge, I mean, you gotta, it's like if you had a farm, let's say you sold coffee, let's say you were Starbucks.
No, you know what?
You know?
If the guy is a multi-billionaire, it's not too cheap. He's just not sharing it properly.
Well, because he got a good deal. Because the record
Right.
company's bent over and
That's
let
why.
him, let
But
him.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has to be, you know, I mean, somebody
right.
up there in the Supreme Court or something,
Yeah.
and they have to like say, hey, this is an
They have to
anomalous.
renegotiate that.
Yeah, and why is it taking so long? I mean,
Nah.
isn't there an artist's right of?
No, man.
You can't.
If the
I mean,
deal-
I'm
if
sure
the-
it's been appealed.
If
already.
everybody decides to pull their shit out of Spotify in protest, then that'll
Then-
work. But
No, I don't think. They
you know what it is? It's like, let's just say you're Starbucks, right?
Oh,
And then you're fucking selling your coffee for a fucking 100 pesos. But you pay the coffee farmer nothing. Eventually, that dude's gonna be like, fuck this, man. I can't make no money off coffee. I'm just gonna go plant something else. And what happens? What are you gonna sell? You're gonna have any more coffee at some point. So what are you gonna do? You're killing yourself. Because eventually, a lot of artists are gonna be like, fuck this. I love music. I'm a great musician, but I got no fucking money. I gotta eat.
so
You know what I
that's-
mean? And that's gonna happen, man.
And so that explains the reason also. That's wwhy they're playing live.
Yeah, that's why, because you gotta do
Right?
it, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
at some point,
Yeah.
so it's like, there's gotta be a good balance with that. Hey man, for more videos of scantily clad women, but classy, scantily
Yeah.
clad women, AOMNL,
Yeah.
baby.